So the thing is that if we had paid enough attention to the first three keys, the fourth key will be a little easier to understand. Without that Advait, having the concept of Advait is very difficult to grasp at the mind level, because mind does not know Advait. Mind knows only the duality. Mind knows only the external world. And to get the mind out of that world of duality and place it in a higher state of Advait is very difficult. And that's why this gradual progression from first three keys into the fourth key was important. So let's go further deep into it. So to make my point, I'll tell you a story. So there was a hunter, and he was hunting for birds in the jungle. And he ended up catching an old bird. The bird was getting old, the feathers were kind of ruffled, did not have luster on the face, the songs were kind of dying out. So the bird did not have that much to offer, but the hunter caught the bird because he was desperate for food. He had nothing else. So the bird tells the hunter, what are you going to do by getting me? I mean, I don't have much to offer in the looks wise or to sell in my feathers are kind of fading. And what are you going to do? Instead of that, let me do this. Let me give you some advice. I'll give you 3 advice. And if you think that this advice is something that can help you, you let me go. Otherwise, you have me, so you can always, catch me and take me with you. So hunter says, okay, let me give it a chance. I have never seen a talking bird before. So what is your first advice? So the bird says that I have seen people suffering, whoever dwells too much in the past. So whoever is bound by the past, whoever cannot get rid of the past, always suffer in the present. So hunter thought that was a good advice. So he thought that this bird, because he's old, may have gathered a lot of wisdom. So according to the condition, the bird says, if you think it was a good advice, let me go. I will still give you the other 2 advice, but I will be sitting on the top of the tree. So hunter says, okay, that's fine, that was a deal. So he let the bird go. So the bird flew to the top. And he says, how about the second advice? He says, second advice is that anything that seems out of normal, don't believe it. He says something that defies your logic. Somebody comes to you and says very unusual thing, always have a doubt on it. So he also thought that that is a good advice for a practical living, and he says that's good. So what about the third advice? He says, before the third advice, I'm going to fly in the sky and tell you about the third advice from the sky. But before I fly, I want to tell you something, that you made a big mistake by letting me go. He says, what do you mean? He says, I have 2 diamonds hidden within my body. If you had caught me, you could have possessed those diamonds and you would have been a rich man. So hunter got very upset and he really got depressed. Yeah. So, and then by the time the bird had started flying in the air, so hunter says, what about the third advice? He says, you didn't follow my first 2 advice, so why should I tell you the third advice? He says, what do you mean? He says, first one I told you that whoever dwells too much in the past is an unhappy man. You are dwelling too much in the past, that you had the bird, this and that and all that, you're letting it go, now you're upset. But whatever happened, that was in the past. But I see there is so much suffering I can see on your face. So you didn't listen to my first advice. The second advice I told you, that anything that seems out of normal, don't believe it. Have you ever seen a bird carrying diamonds with himself? But you believed me. So you didn't follow the first 2 advice. Why should I give you the third advice? So my theory is that if you don't come for the first 3 lectures, why should I tell you? Why should I talk about the 4th lecture? But I'm not cruel. I will not be as cruel as the bird. So let's go on with the 4th key.
That is the difference between bird and you, a human being, right?
So I'm not like that bird. So I'll tell you about the 4th key. There is a story of a fakir. There was a sadhu who was walking by in the time when India was still not free. He was found snooping around the encampment of the Britishers the tents were set up of the Britishers, and this fakir was found to be walking around. So they brought him, some soldier caught him, and they brought him in the front of the colonel, and they started asking him, what are you doing here? And there was a friction going on between the Indians and the British army. So he wouldn't talk. So that made them more suspicious that he must be a spy. Maybe he's trying to gather some information to get an advantage over us. So they told him that if you don't speak, we'll kill you. He still did not speak. And then ultimately the orders were given to kill him. The bayonet of the rifle was pierced through, and he was instantly dying. And right before he was dying, he spoke these words, Tattvamasi. Yes. Thou art that. Means you are that too. And then he died. He said that, why didn't you speak before? At least there are some pieces of conversation before he died. He says, I was in silence for 15 years. And my whole purpose in remaining in the silence was to merge with Advait. And the sense of Advait and the conception of the Advait I had deep rooted in my psyche. And I had such a firm belief in being at this Advait state that until something drastic happens in my life, I had no way to prove that theory. And I had decided that if something major happens, and at that time I still do not see the difference between me and the opposite person, I will speak these words, Tattvamasi. So Tattvamasi is a very famous quote in Sanskrit, that you are also that. I am that and you are that too. So when you pierced my chest with the bayonet, I realized that you are the same Advait state, you are the same consciousness playing on me to kill me, but both are at the Advait level, we are the same people. There is no difference. And I have a firm belief in my mind, and I had decided I will speak when I can prove my theory. I don't care about dying. It doesn't matter to me, but at least I firmly lived my life in the belief of Advait, and I'm dying with that belief. That's my satisfaction. And then he died. So Advait means there is no difference between me and this vast consciousness. The differences that you see between you and the vast consciousness are only at the mind level. But that's only if you choose to live at the mind level. Nobody forcing you to live at the mind level. But to be able to see the connection between you and the vast consciousness, the universe, is your choice. And when you achieve that state, you are in Advait. So, once you go to that state where you cannot tell the difference between you and the consciousness, you are at that state of Advait, and at that time you dissolve yourself, your ego, your knowledge of yourself, knowledge of the others, everything is dissolved, and you merge with Paramatma, and you live in the state of highest bliss, and that's the state of only existence. You exist. Past disappears, future disappears, duality disappears, and you are in that state of existence and bliss 24/7. And that state, even though it is tough to achieve, people have achieved and people have lived in that state. And with that state, it doesn't matter where you are, you can be in that state 24/7, still doing everything that you do. The only you will know that state. Nobody else may not know that they're looking at you. And how do we reach there? So how to reach to the state of Advait? The duality is a factor of imagination. We have imagined the differences. We have imagined the connections. We have imagined that I'm going to acquire something, I'm going to hold something. All these imaginations have created compartments, because that's how mind knows. That's how the mind works. Mind divides everything. And on that division, the mind feeds. The job of the mind is to divide. And with the divisions, mind can continue forever. But we don't know the subtle workings of the mind. But the mind is our own mind. We cannot fight with the mind. Only time we can realize the subtle nature of the mind, we reach Advaita. So to realize, you have to separate yourself from the mind and observe how the mind is working. It's like the story of a dog. He ended up in a palace of a king. And for his own luxury, the king had set up one room made out of mirrors. Nothing but mirrors. And the dog ended up in that room by mistake. All of a sudden, the mind of the dog was working, and all of a sudden it saw so many dogs around him. So natural reaction was start barking. So he barked, and 1,000 other dogs barked. Then he started attacking, 1,000 other dogs attacked him. And it kept on going all night, and in the morning, the dog was found dead. All the multiple reflections were his own creation. We divide the world for our purposes, and we think that this portion I'm going to win, I'm going to be better than you, I'm going to be holding more things than you. All that fight goes on. It's all in the imagination. Because whatever you acquire, it's still part of that Advaita that we have never come out of it. You can never come out of Advaita. Advaita is the totality. Whatever you win is also here. Whatever you lost is also here. But that concept is like playing Monopoly. When you play Monopoly, before the game starts, everybody gets X amount of dollars. And then, within the game of Monopoly, that you're playing 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, you may go to jail, you may build a motel, you may collect the rent, this and that, but everything is coming out of that bank.
Yeah.
And the bank was never yours to begin with.
Correct.
And yet, we enjoy the game of Monopoly, thinking that we are building hotels and we are all these imaginary things, and at the end of the day, you order pizza and have a good time. So the Advaita includes everything. The concept of totality is where you have to realize your wins are also here, your losses are also here, you haven't gained anything, you haven't lost anything, the birth doesn't mean anything, death does not mean anything. At the Advaita level, nobody dies. You don't exist. If you don't exist, how does the birth exist? How does the death exist? And even scientifically we have proven that the matter only changes hands. Matter is only an exchange of energy. Energy turns into matter, matter turns into energy, but the total energy can never be destroyed and never cannot be created. So creation is a fake thing, destruction is a fake thing. Energy never gets destroyed. It's converted, it transformed into something else. Mechanical energy into electrical energy to whatever. But the energy transformation takes place. Destruction is not there. So to have that concept and to get established in that state of mind is Advaita. So it's like we have to start realizing our connection with the consciousness, with the samasti, they call, the whole universe. When we realize our connection with the whole universe, our individuality starts dissolving. If somebody throws a stone on a pond, the waves start. After 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the final wave reaches to the shore. Whoever is looking at that wave has no idea what started the waves in the first place. Now, they may not be able to make the connection, but the connection is there. The connection is definitely there because we know that.
Yeah.
He may not know that.
Correct.
But to realize that whatever is in front of us has happened over the period of centuries.
Correct.
And ultimately, whatever world we are seeing is only a wave that is passing through in front of our eyes, including us being part of that wave. We are only the wave. The continuity of what has started thousands and millions of years back, it still exists right now. Right? So, we are the similar waves that are existing at the moment just because the Advait has thrown us into so-called Dvait state by giving us the mind to appreciate the duality. The moment the mind is gone, we're going to merge back into the Advait state again. Because in that huge existence, which is totally formless, which is omnipotent, it has all the energy of the total universe. In that we exist. Existence is the only reality. Now, existence can be in two different forms, manifest or unmanifest.
Okay.
So, when we don't see something, we think it does not exist. We did not see that stone that started the process of the waves. So, we think that this is the only wave that exists, and that's all we know, and we deal with it. But not realizing that our window into the universe is very limited. We have only 5 senses to look at this universe. If we had 6th senses, then we would see the universe in a totally different way. We find out the people who are colorblind, right? People who are colorblind, for them the world is totally different than yours and mine.
They perceive in a totally different
Right,
way.
but they don't know that. Sometimes they find out after 20, 30, 40 years of life that this person is colorblind. And all of a sudden, you realize that I always used to have argument with other people. I call this green, he used to call blue. Oh, whatever. You know, the people have differences. But then never thinking that the color blindness was the key factor. But that color blindness becomes a routine for that particular person. It's the same way, whatever we perceive with 5 senses is all we know. Whatever we don't know still exists, but we just cannot perceive it. I told you about that animal, platypus. Have you heard of that platypus? Platypus is an animal which is a cross between a bird and a mammal. Like mammal, it suckles the baby, has a milk, but like a bird, it lays the eggs. So it's a link between reptile, which is birds, to the mammals. So they have found, and it exists in New Zealand and certain areas. Now this platypus is an animal, but it goes underwater for hunting, right? Now, when it goes underwater, it closes its eyes, closes its ears, and catches the prey. How do you do that? Because it has a special sense of a radio frequency field that it throws. In that radio frequency, even with the eyes closed, even with the ears closed, it catches the prey and comes back.
Just like bats, right?
Just like that, exactly. But this is underwater, and that one. So different medium, different capacities to do the hunting for the survival. Now this platypus is known for multiple hormones. We have 2 main sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. Estrogen makes us females and testosterone makes us males. But that's all we know. But even between these 2 hormones, the whole world is created and ups and downs are going on. Wars have been fought and hatred, grief, possessions, all these things, the sansar has been going through for just those 2 hormones. Platypus has 13 hormones. Now you figure it out. To be a mammal and to be a bird, it requires different set of hormones. Because mammals, yes, you can get away with 2 hormones. But as a bird, it requires different set of hormones to lay the eggs. So what I'm trying to say is world is more complicated than we know. Elephants have been found to communicate with each other over hundreds of miles in a very supersonic ways where you and I cannot hear. But they send the signals to each other. And this is natural for them. It's not that they are scientists and they have invented new technology or anything. This is given to them by the nature. So nature gives you what you need for the moment. So at our physical body, we have 5 senses. And our world is limited with those 5 senses. But good thing is, human being has another sense which can fold itself at the mind level and pursue its journey into the Paramatma. And that's something we have to explore. And that Advait state we can reach only by going within. And that's an evolution going fast forward. If you and I, we don't do anything, our next generation or the generation after is going to reach that state naturally. But that's the evolution is going to throw them into that state. They're going to be bounced around and ultimately realize that this is a better state than that state. So ultimately you will start dropping. You will learn your mistakes and you will fix it, and then you will go further back. But that's evolution happening after several generations. But we can fast forward that right now by using the spirituality. And that's the job of spirituality, to make you realize that people have used that apana, that state, a higher level of pranas, which can, or udan ultimately, to that state of enlightenment.
How many sets of hormone wife has?
We won't get into that. So, the key thing is the discussions about Advaita.